Sheila here with Sirius Dallas Moon, Jupiter, our Jupiter in Cancer in the 12th house, ruled by the moon in the 4th house. 12 degree Scorpio moon. And midheaven is around Beta Persei, ascendant 28 degrees Leo, sun in Aries. Well, I want to address something. I talked about the structural bind of NATO, where NATO delaying on Article 5. I know that Prime Minister Maloney met with several countries, basically trying to bridge between Europe and United States, and Macron got caught up in the act of refusing to open Hormuz and smuggling ships. So, um, and but and what is the structural bind? The structural bind is that Europe is waiting on acting on Article 5, although basically, I don't know. But that could create a bind where if Europe is being attacked, United States would wait on Article 5. Now, the question is, why is Europe reluctant? And this could even be a wording, a little bit of defense of that Macron move there. So it is something that should concern Israel as well. United States sees the entire region as New Egypt, which means that United States gets the benefit of activating artillery where the interest was created that Israel would also invest artillery, while Israel is not selling. His weapon is not selling as much because of those delays. And that basically disarms Israel. Now, Europe doesn't want to get to the same situation. Okay? Now, the point about Israel being emptied up of its weaponry is following a conversation here, but connecting that to Europe is something that we see really binds Europe. I cannot say binds NATO because NATO is both Europe and United States. And while structurally keeping a unified NATO would necessitate Europe to activate Article 5, because that can backfire if the possibility that Europe would have joined Article 5 disarmed, and it's already being disarmed with Ukraine. And then basically nothing prevents it from being attacked by US. United States sees the entire region from Egypt, Middle East, and so on and so forth as New Egypt. Um, so, and then we have France, which completely smuggles a ship under the radar of oil, kind of getting, kind of like Macron understanding that we can take over oil the U.S. way, namely a lot of weaponry and so on and so forth. Alternatively, we can do business. So Macron was a bit of a Shimon Peres, having peace in the Middle East through trade. But we can definitely see that France is showing us, hey, when it comes to our interests in Iran, namely oil, we can have, like, if it's oil we are fighting for, we can simply trade it. If it's maritime borders and international routes we're fighting for, we can simply trade it. And now it begs a bigger question. What is it that U.S. and I can't say Israel because Israel is bombed, but what is it that United States is fighting for in Iran that necessitates opening Hormuz by military and not by trade? Now, United States has had a Ron Arad case, which is basically a plane fell down, the pilot was saved, the navigator. Don't be a navigator. I don't. Don't be an aviation navigator. I wanted to be an aviation navigator once because when my mom traveled with me to Europe to see Netherlands on my birthday, then I was the navigator and she was the driver. So it's really fun for a 12-year-old kid to read the maps and be able to navigate the way. And there's an adult counting on you. And and I'm like, maybe I'll be an aviation navigator. Looking at looking at these cases, as yeah, it would for any Israeli company, it would necessitate me joining the Air Force, which was not made of that particular material. But by the way, NATO is looking for gamers to protect the drones. I don't get dividends for that. Now, this begs an even bigger question. Why doesn't Israel trade with Iran? I mean, if we are for denuclearification, that we would expect that to be mutual or global. But If we are to remove the Ayatollah regime, removing the human trafficking within Israel is kind of like taking precedence over and could avoid invasion way better. So Macron's business savvy move was kind of Shimon Peres offered it, Macron did it. And you know what? You know what Macron did, France? But now they're, 1973. Entire Arab Peninsula embargoes the West for oil. Israel gets oil from Iran. I guess every single rotten thing in France, even even from the time of before the French Revolution, is probably going to be published by peer reviews. Every single thing you couldn't write about France, we're gonna know. You know, people won't be able to get published in any politics and governance or political science Q1 without writing something dirty about France. Um, but here's the difference between 73 and France. Israel is not a part of the EU. France is a part of a bigger conglomerate that was thinking whether to go to war or not and decided to take care of its energy interest in peaceful means. Macron is a fucking genius. It's nothing to say. That's and also foresee to the bind that there is already a weapon trade mishap. Whether because weapon is going for the war of the frontier with Ukraine, which is kind of like that's the frontier with Russia. Just one more frontier, there is a world war. And eliminating the Middle East region through basically trade. Um, Israel, by the way, in Hebrew, I can't take this call though. Um, later. By the way, in Hebrew, the visit of Prime Minister Maloney was framed as, unlike the rest of Europe, Prime Minister Maloney is joining the war with Iran. I look for the same article in English and I find nothing. There was a secret visit and there was a big article that framed that visit. And when we read the content, we see that the title was a clickbait. She was coming to visit the area. So, of course, they care to take care of the energy requirements of Italy, but that can be done, as we've seen with France, without war. We have a candidate that wanted to declare Qatar, an oil giant, an enemy to Israel, and then we have a person who simply paid a little money to break the oil market. Now the question is which one of them would actually dissolve the oil cartel? um, And when we talk about electric revolution is only relevant when there's no targeting of people or civilians and so on. And the companies that were set to target and particularly to psychiatrically tag people over nothing were detained over nothing in the country that purchased their services. So, um, and then they got another litigation for complying with human trafficking, pedophilia, and another litigation for addictive algorithm. Now, addictive algorithm sounds funny, but when you have children that are eligible to use the platform and basically become addicted to using the platform and have all kinds of nervous system dysregulations, then that can become a little more problematic. And we see a new way to see social media and the restrictions coming from something that's not a censorship, but holding accountable of the companies um, for trafficking. Now people will say, but Chile, trafficking is a global conglomerate and Epstein and so on and so forth. Yeah, but these guys were rubbing shoulders with Epstein, so it's kind of like, according to Dodge, okay, to the 30 million files. Um, yeah. What does it mean for Europe? Definitely the friction between the EU and US exists, but sometimes the friction is simply understanding that New Egypt in the Middle East and getting EU to vouch for that will not share resources with the EU. Now, will US attack entire Europe over nothing? I think that even in the current settings, it would be very. The threat of withdrawing forces from the efforts with Ukraine has already been implemented. What Europe could gain from Article 5 is only to be depleted from, let's say, fending for the Arctic. Now, the only thing that US will be able to do is to get Europe to be attacked, but that already binds US. And this binds US for basically a very important reason. As far as I can recall, no American missile fell within the US national borders. No Iranian missile fell within the national borders of the US. No, I'm not including military basements outside the US. I know that those are supposed to prompt Article 5, but an attack inside Europe is already a preliminary for an attack inside the United States. Now, This could be a setting for a Pearl Harbor. So, and Europe knows that. Europe knows that if it's attacked within Europe, and the United States still withdraws forces. And no, Ukraine is not a NATO nation. I know there were a lot of discussions, but Ukraine at the time of the break of the war was not a NATO nation. I know that we see Zelensky with NATO sharing coffee, but it's basically because NATO is allying up to protect its interest and assist Ukraine without the promise, and that was the work of Mark Rutte to define the boundaries, that nothing is promised to Ukraine. That's not what Zelensky would say, but this is where. But they can share meanwhile the coffee, and they do share the entire weapon industry. So, so it's kind of like there is some sort of assistance to Zelensky because of the geopolitical placement that, for example, Finland might not have had, and which is why Finland is a NATO nation with all that entails. As per NATO, of course, it's happy to have Finland. People that go to work regularly under any weather conditions, particularly in the winters, make good soldiers. Um, what more can I say about the topic? Had Europe joined United States and Israel to Article 5, basically it would be in a full-blown world war. And and then Europe would for sure be attacked because it's closer, but United States is kind of distant. It's not that they can't reach United States, but the global effect of the West, whether we like it or not, whether we think it's just or not, when United States is attacked, it's always kind of like a Pearl Harbor or a 9/11. When Europe is attacked, it's like, yeah, another terror bomb happened with thousands of people dead. And um, and the thought that the United States wouldn't at some time, I'm not saying betray, because it's not like Hitler and Stalin, but definitely, rethink its national interests in the face of Europe, some went during a world war, or even save its defense for its own national borders. Okay, for example, United States is very likely less likely to drop Hiroshima and Nagasaki if Paris is attacked than if, let's say, New York. Not even Washington. It's a sad truth, but I think it's true. And the vice versa, we simply geopolitically do not get. Even around 9/11, there were also bombings in Europe. And this would drag, now the major contributor to NATO is Germany, and this would Um, Definitely in the beginning strengthened Germany, but we're not talking about, at least at the time of this recording, Hitler's Germany or anything like that. I was worried about Germany becoming way more armed about 2-3 years ago. I was looking at the charts of Germany. So while structurally they call to adhere to Article 5, um, doesn't seem wrong when we talk about the praxis. Is NATO sovereign from military intelligence targeting of soldiers and civilians of the allied nations? And the question is not sufficiently answered, which would make entire activation of Article 5, I'm not saying futile, but definitely disrupted and disturbed. And this is how we get a situation where Rutte is right, and Trump is right, and Macron is right, and Meloni is right, even though they all have different opinions. But Europe sees with the lead of France that it can sort out its energy interest in the Middle East through trade in peaceful terms, even during war times. And particularly while weapons deals are falling flat, randomly and without a warning, just think about the Economic Times really covers the litigations against the COVID vaccine. I have a new YouTube channel because the previous one, okay, when I quoted Kenya removing the immunity of Gates because of something castrating that he put in some sort of, I think it was malaria vaccines. Like and that was immediately. But now I see the Economy Times covering this topic. So those things are in the background, and people died of the shot. Statistically, as far as I understood, and I could be wrong, more so than they died of COVID. Now, it doesn't mean that there wasn't COVID. And so, if we think about, let's say, soldiers that had the vaccine and now need to be training and get sudden heart attacks over nothing, okay, that creates an overall implication. And so taking into consideration the big picture, full-blown Article 5, and I did not mention anything like pacifism, which always happens. It's kind of like whether a decision to go to war is good or bad. Pacifism has existed and will always exist. And it's not like we have a statistic of 30 World War to do statistical analysis of the rates of pacifism and so on and so forth. Naturally, if it's a bigger war, then also pacifism will be statistically bigger because we call statistically more people to war. If some of them were jabbed and get a heart attack during training, and now it's less people. Um, and this is true to all frontiers because the COVID was a global issue. And pacifism is also a global issue. The more coerced or mandatory an army is, the less effective it is. The more people shoot at commanders, that in a very literal rank-wise way, it backfires. They say, Shirley, but how are people going to have an army? Nobody wants to die at war. They say that is true. And to coerce people to fight creates, all it's kind of like actually them going to war is the last of the efforts. Even if in the beginning they could be so excited, so this, so that, they raped by one commander, and gone is the enthusiasm and the patriotism. They discovered that there is a recommendation to not even talk about this, and now they mistrust the entire system, even if the higher ranks have no idea what's happening in the lower ranks. They're called traitors for questioning something as illegal order. Now here is the thing, there is a pflicht, there is a must to disobey legal order. Of course, sometimes an order is actually illegal and sometimes an order is not actually illegal. Of course, both cases where there is suspicion that an order is illegal necessitate disobedience. But then they're called traitors for disobeying illegal orders or for thinking in retrospective as they try to heal from PTSD about whether their actions were legal or not. Now we got a civil war. Add to the fact that during security or war, there is legitimacy to restrict demonstrations because there isn't a shelter to host more than 50 or 150 people, as is now the case in Israel. What if the demonstration is against the war? Okay, as right now is the case in Israel. Now again, I'm not saying that the demonstration against the war is always right or not right. I'm just pointed at the structure here. So now here is another thing that's coming. People will call it grassroots, but I think it's just praxis. There were a lot of people that were counting on trafficking, enslaving. Now, here is the drama. It's kind of like, let's say you reach a village. And you say, oh, these people can be, I don't know, sex trafficked. And you run into people, and you have no idea what's happening in the village. And a lot of these people, they're like, well, they're not working, they're not this, they're not that, because there was trafficking within the community. And now you're running to people that have had it. Okay? Kind of like, it's not just to do that, but as a Me Too survivor, I kind of feel bad for the people that sexually harassed women before the Me Too. They would have run into women that have had it. It's kind of, because for them, even women, by the way, They were used to different type of communication. They were used to the courtesan division. They didn't know whether a person was raped, tortured, and so on and so forth, and then they act weird. They were just saying, hey, this person doesn't have a boyfriend, why? But oh, she dressed nice, why? Oh, hey, this person's very flirty, very this, very that. They're probably climbing up the ladder, not knowing that person is traffic tortured and they have a handler. And then came the newer generation, particularly after the subprime. A lot of people couldn't work anymore, so they took a course, or they took this, or they tried to be independent, or they tried a different field or sector, and then they ran into something that exploded a fundamental thing from within, like A-bombs. And the people around there, like they weren't even getting what's happening. Everybody were responding to that normally. Why do these people suddenly, not only do they talk, we talk about people that were linked to the elite wouldn't talk. But they're like stopping at nothing. And it was a very big shift that even women didn't get. So, and then when people think, oh, person, I don't know, person could be a slave of this or that. Well, you look at the people and the people like, well, that person cannot stand on their feet. That person cannot, I don't know. For example, if I would try to be a salesperson at the company and so on and so forth, and probably if somebody would look, hey, this person talks all the time and they're broadcasting it, maybe they can market our colonial empire. But there would be corruption. I would have sore throat. It's like, what, don't you want to work? It's a lot of money. I'm like, yeah, but I can only speak when I speak the truth. Otherwise, I have sore throat. I haven't even noticed because I've been talking for days and days and days and days. And it's like, when I try to be a salesperson or to work at a call center, every time I would have a sore throat, I would run to the bathroom 10 times. My boss is already saw there's something wrong. The person is stressed because of the environment. And even if the company was a good company, then the son of the father of the owner of the company would be affiliated with the secret society and, kind of like Epstein weirdo cult rituals, and then I wouldn't be able to be around them. The amount of vulnerability and authentic truth shared. The different generations, different people, when people see that, it's kind of like, and then people are counting on people where, to begin with, let's say if a person is already working, I don't know, very seriously and so on and so forth, usually what would happen is that they would become sick. I know, I was that person. I was young, I really wanted to make money and work and I was like, yeah, I know I can't stand on my feet, but let me try, and so on and so forth. And then I sit in the fucking shift on the floor. In McDonald's, people are looking at me, and nothing I can do about that. Anybody remembers the Rakuten? We had a model in McDonald's, and he was taking Rakuten. He was like, Shirley, you gotta try this. I took this, my skin is amazing, and so on. He forgot to tell me what were the side effects. So I tried that, And then I come to work and I cannot lift the chips dispenser. And it's like, yeah, that's the Rakuten. I'm like, motherfucker, why didn't you tell me? Now that dumb fuck thing affected the mental health as well. And I was a teenager. The developing brain. And he wasn't even marketing Now, again, his skin was amazing. I call it chemotherapy for acne. The amount of old ladies that would come to me and kind of say, you are so beautiful. Why don't you put cucumbers on your skin? Even when I learned aromatherapy, I learned how to do the oil blends for scent and for energy. But that was my teenagers. So people come and they think, oh, this will be slaves, this will be this will be that. And they have no contact with reality. You know what I think? When do slave relations work? You see the people that would come to, let's say, cater to elderly people. Which, by the way, with my ADHD, I have to be really happy that my parent is so independent. Like, people get disgusted from cleaning this, cleaning that. I'm like, it's not even the thing. My energy is less than the energy of the elderly person that I need to assist. Now, here's the drama. If I need to walk, sometimes I'm able to. In the past, I used to be able to walk way more. If I need to stand for 1 second, it means that I'm sitting. The middle of a dirty floor in the supermarket, sitting. The middle of a dirty floor when I don't know, when my parent goes to the ATM, sitting. Like, if there would be a totalitarian regime, I would simply get shot to death. When I was homeless in Netherlands, the way I got the name of the IMO shelter, I was looking for shelter, and they had no solution whatsoever. And they were like, okay, then back to the street. And I was sitting there. Like, I was so fucking tired that I basically couldn't get up. I wasn't even being defiant. I just simply couldn't stand anymore. Very physically so. So this is another reality check. Now here's another thing. After COVID and so on and so forth, people are going to say, hey, all the people get on these buses, on these trains. Nobody trusts them anymore. Okay? Nor do people trust the residence that's being provided. At least in Israel. I'm not talking about all the world. And this is where people get really frustrated. The energy that they need to invest in what they thought would work for them, they are, instead of being the masters, they become the servants of nothing, because it's not like they were hiring a person. And if they would be, it would have to be Gen Z friendly. Zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning, and with a schedule that allows one to develop their own business. Now also people expect that people are just going to collapse their expectations because it is war. But people are like, well, the entire war is because... So it ain't like the money is missing. It ain't like the land is missing. It ain't like the opportunities or the housing is missing. No, people wanted to traffic people and launder our human rights in more dividends in an oil company than our dividends is human rights, and way more actually during war. The national threats, people like, because of all of these things that were particularly around, because nobody owns a house anymore as their own residence, except for the people that murdered children, I know, but because but even their children, because they wrote assets on the name of the children. Now they rented the assets because it's their passive income for retirement. Now the child, not my case, I did not agree for such deal because I had a feeling that I don't know how to get along in this working sector markets, and that the belief that I would just work and be able to buy a house, if it wasn't really working for my parent, and if I become sick at workplaces because of corruption, then I don't know if I would need assistance. And it was not like a big major tax violation. Everybody was doing that. Now what happened to children even younger than me? Where the parents did that, they had their retirement depends on the assets in passive income, but the child has no money to pay even rent. In the subprime crisis, families, I had my boss in a high-tech company, Shimko Tekludan. My boss with her husband, with their children, with their doggy, lived by their parents. She should have been around my age now. Kind of like mid-late 30s, or in my age, which would be beginning of 40s. At least I did not bring a family. And everybody felt however competent they were. First of all, we discovered that we're competent. Okay? Like really, if a person doesn't go to work and so on and so forth, they don't know what they're capable of doing when they're working. And basically, whether it was running a high-tech college branch, I had no idea that I can be competent. But that competent only sustains when it yields and when it's not corrupt. And when the people are growing. And I became sick and I became disabled and I lost my ability to work. But what happened is not I lost my ability to work. An entire generation wanted to unalive itself because the working sector became trying to make people used to slavery. So it's kind of like most of the people are already worn out. The rest tried to kill themselves. A lot of them died. And the people that try to, I don't know, loot or enslave or whatnot, either the rich people that are so exhausted that anyway they cannot work. Or the rich people that have so had it that they would be kamikazes. The third option, because there's always a third option, is that they would be rebellion leaders. But we're not talking about, Pluto will trine Uranus for a couple of years from the first decan of Gemini. Then it goes from the trine to the inconjunct. And then they were thinking, oh, we can restrict the movement of people and so on. Now here's the thing. People, particularly after COVID, have been so restricted that one of two things happen. Either, let's say tell a person, oh, you cannot sit here, there's curfew. They're like, get a helicopter or something, like they're too tired. Or alternatively, I'm telling you, they're gonna run into one of the Gen Zers that are like, oh, cool, shoot me to death. Or they're gonna run into a person that have so had it from lockdowns and missiles and shelters that they're gonna, okay, even if an A bomb drops now, I'm taking a walk. And there are these people. I had a neighbor, she would never come out during the sirens. She knew the missiles, that back then missiles were arriving from Gaza. And she knew the missiles arriving from Gaza. They didn't even come out to the stairs. She was like, they would fly above my head. Don't ask for why. The person was retired, used to work at the health ministry, on pills against depression, taking care of taking care of the family, taking care of children, or not even their children, taking catering to the calls of the neighbors, and they were just staying house. Now, the people that are told that they are going to have, I don't know, let's say a slave colony. Remember, I'm half Dutch. We had Volk, which is Dutch East India. It took from the Amsterdam Bank, which was supposed to be zero usury, had another book, with a distortion code. That's how. They had another book. They took gold, sailed the sea. They brought silver. No, the silver did not exceed the worth of the gold. 45% of coming out alive, because if you look at Netherlands, when they go out to sea, it's the North Sea. Had Suriname, had Indonesia, were known as some of the most cruel colonizers. I mean, they were a small country. So it wasn't like Britain that could write off a lot of things. So everything, all the junk came out. And go figure that people were treating the colonized people the way that they were treated. And these guys rebelled. Okay, because if they inbred with women from Indonesia and from Malaysia and from Suriname, it means that they saw their bloodlines as worthy for inbreeding. You see, Muslim refugees, they arrived at, let's say, France, Netherlands, and so on and so forth. They used to live in a mansion. Now, they know the country was looted for oil. And they know that the asylum is with one of the countries that profit off the looting for oil. Okay? Then they're being housed in a place that's like a caravan, or that's like a room that was... Now, for the locals, it's a student apartment. For the people that were coming from Arab countries, they felt degraded, humiliated, and treated with disrespect. Oh God. Yeah. Pardon. And this is how, now here's the thing, the crimes against humanity that were happening at the colonies, they were anyway happening. Think about apartheid. Nelson Mandela was controversial because, not because he wanted to kick out apartheid, but because he was against bloodline segregation. And he says, Chile, but it wasn't apartheid bloodline segregation. Yes, but he was against bloodline segregation, not only when it's a white colonizer. 28 years in jail. And he was even adopting